why I'm adopted? Like,
no, I was just seeing if you'd click fast enough that I'd come in on that, because that would be awesome.
As I was clicking, I was like, I don't think whatever joke Andy's coming up with is gonna make it, and I kind of wanted it to until you said it, and I was like, no, I hope it didn't make it, because come on, Andy. So yeah, well, before we get going, I'm gonna go ahead and share our link to. Hey, I can edit this right now. That's nice.
So my goal is to somehow start every episode like that.
View on the watch page. Oh, I could just click on view on the watch page. That is awesome. All right, and then I can click that. I can pop out chat. Here is a link to all you beautiful gentlemen to the pop out chat, should you choose to accept it.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay. And then all I'm going to do is just really quickly post in the guild here. All right, there's news. Here's the live recording link. And I think I will also.
Yeah, none of the heavy gamers are going to be doing that today.
None of the heavy gamers are doing what?
None of them are going to be coming in live. Well,
none of them are.
Well, I think Heavy Cardboard for Patreon backers, they're letting people like in the scenes on one of their podcast recordings tonight. That started like an hour ago, or actually, I think it might start at the same time, given Mountain Time.
It's starting at the same time.
So yeah, anyway, yeah. So all the Patreon heavy gamers will be over there playing around.
If you missed the live chat, post your comments.
Blah, 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 blah. Okay.
All right. I've just posted it in our link. I will also go on to the Good Board Ugly Facebook and post it on there.
Do.
Okay. Thank you guys for your patience. I think that's all posted. And I've got the document right here. Trent, is it going to be King Domino or Notre Dame?
King Domino.
Let me change that. I am excited for you to talk about it. Well, about as excited as I can be about King Domino. But I'm excited for you to talk about it because I did just get a chance to play it as well. And anyway, Andy, looks like 1867. Is this going to be mainly online that you played that one?
Yeah.
Okay. So here we go. 3, 2, 1. Hello and welcome to The Good, The Board, and The Ugly, a podcast about board games. I'm the host of The Good, The Board, and The Ugly, Joe Sallin. Tonight I'm joined by
Andrew Dennison.
Trent Ham.
And we are taking on a raging wildfire of ongoing debate in the board gaming hobby, which is ethics and bias in board game reviews. This is regarding people being paid to do reviews for videos online. This is also regarding people getting review copies as almost, is it a form of payment? We will be discussing that in our topic. We have a lot of really interesting positions on this to share, and though we've not really shared them with each other so far, I think that you will find during this topic it will be quite interesting to see exactly what we have to say. So anyway, before we do that, I'd like to really quickly thank our sponsor, Game Surplus. Game Surplus, bringing the world of board games to you. Game Surplus, you can find them at gamesurplus.com. And the funny thing is, guys, when I mentioned Game Surplus, like, they're not in any way, like, our reviews are not being paid by Game Surplus. I just now realized, like, Andy's laughing. It's like, wow, that sounds really horrible, doesn't it? Yes. But yeah, Game Surplus
about the ethics. And here's our sponsor.
Yeah, here's our sponsor. So anyway,
our discussion of paid reviews is being sponsored by GameSurplus.com.
God, don't say that.
It sounds so bad, and I think what we're getting at though is going to be a different part of the hobby. We're talking about like review copies coming from a person whose livelihood is a specific game and how well that specific game sells. And then anyway, Game Surplus is simply a middleman, and so it's quite a bit different there. The services that Game Surplus provides, though, is really in forming a community and in sponsoring The Good, the Board, and the Ugly, which they are currently sponsoring The Good, the Board, and the Ugly. They also sponsor Heavy Cardboard. I think they just picked up low player count. Like, they're looking to sponsor some of the best content creators, and I feel very proud to be counted among when I hear the other people that are sponsored by Game Surplus. It makes me very proud. So anyway, they're just a good place to go get your games. So I order my games there, and anyway, because I love their service and because I do find that that the products that they have, they're able to get a lot of the games that you don't have other places. So we review games. We then discuss the topic in the hobby, and on our way out the door, we hype games that we are looking forward to play. So we're going to start this session of reviews by talking about this year's Spiel des Jahres. Trent, take it away.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about King Domino, which, as Joe alluded to, is the winner of this year's Spiel des Jahres. King Domino is I guess I would say a very short game. I would describe it as a filler. I think that is probably a fair description of it. It plays from 2 to 4 players. It plays, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes. Designed by Bruno Catala, published by Blue Orange Games in the United States. So, in King Domino, basically, it's a tile-laying game. When I played it, it felt like a light Carcassonne is kind of how it felt. Except you had your own little kingdom that you're building. Essentially what it is there's a whole pile of domino-shaped tiles. So they have 2 squares on them. So they're rectangular and have 2 squares on them that can do a domino, hence the name King Domino. You're building a kingdom out of dominoes. It's supposed to be clever, I guess. Okay, so
hey Trent, please thoroughly explain the joke.
Yes, it's pretty much that.
The best jokes are those thoroughly explained.
Yeah, so you have a starting tile that's 1 square, and you're supposed to be building a 5x5 array of squares to make your kingdom. So if you do the math there real quick, you realize you have 25 possible squares, and one of them's already taken. So that means you have 24 you need to fill throughout the game. Which means since there's 2 per domino, you have to end up adding 12 dominoes to your kingdom.
But you might not.
You might not if you do it really badly. You might end up adding 11, or if you really mess up, adding only 10. I don't even know if you could add only 9. I don't know if that's even possible, but you could end up adding.
Yeah, you could, dude. You can make you can really have it checkerboarded so that every other space on the outside is a single.
Yeah, you'd have to almost be trying to do that, and that's.
Yeah, at that point you would. But theoretically you could have 4 missing dominoes, I think,
okay,
or more.
The game comes with 48 dominoes. They're numbered 1 through 48 on the back. The higher numbered ones generally have more value than the lower numbered ones. Each one depicts 2 little squares of a terrain type. There's several different terrain types in the game. There's fields and pastures and mines and other things. Some of them depict, they all depict a very similar looking landscape. They're easy to identify. Some of them also have a little crown designator on them. It's very little. It's in the corner. Some of them even have 2 or 3 crowns. So what you're trying to do is build regions of contiguous area of the same type with as many crowns as possible as you can get on it, because what you're going to do when you score at the end of the game is you're going to multiply those 2 numbers. So let's say you manage to get 3 mine areas that are contiguous next to each other in your final layout. If they had a total of 4 crowns on them, you take 3 times 4, you score 12 points for that region. Great. And then you go on to score all of your other regions the same way. As you're playing the game, the way it starts is you randomly start the game and choose a random player. And then that player looks at, there's a number of tiles available to choose from that are in numerical order from top to bottom. So you look at the number on the back, sort them, and then flip them over to see what they look like on the front. And then you have a worker, and you place your worker on whichever one of those you want. And then the second player puts it on whatever the one remaining they want. And then third player and the fourth player and so on, however many players you have. Okay, but you don't initially take that tile and add it. Then you lay out a second column of them. Again, sorting them by the back. Except then you go in order on whoever chose the first one. So whoever chose the top one, which would be the lowest numbered one, gets to choose from the second column first. And as soon as they move their guy over to their second choice, they take the one they were originally on and add it to their kingdom. Just add it. You can rotate it around however you'd like, but you just add it in. So your goal each time is to try to build these large contiguous regions of the same terrain type and get some of those regions to include some crowns, because you want big multipliers. Because, you know, if both of your numbers are big, it's going to multiply to a real big number. You do this over 12 rounds. You have to fit all the tiles that you get within a 5x5 square. You add up your points at the end. That's King Domino. It's really light. It's pretty. It's got very nice components. It's a game that my 7-year-old actually really enjoys. My 11-year-old enjoys it. My 9-year-old enjoys it. It's a good family game. I would play it at a game night as a pure filler. But there's no game night in the world I would ever go to strictly play King Domino. That's not the kind of game it is. This is a filler game. There's like no other word for this game that I can think of. It's very, very light family game. I think a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old could probably play this. It's really not complicated at all. But there are still decisions in it. It's not like there are no decisions. You have to kind of think ahead a little bit in terms of whether it's more important for you to take the best available tile or to wait on that and get a lesser valuable tile that will give you a better choice in the subsequent round. There's also, as I found, is if you start playing it a lot, there's ends up being some defensive drafting. I have definitely done some defensive drafting and had some defensively done against me, where people are taking tiles that would be blatantly good for me and not so good for another player, but that other player will take it because if I got it, it would be like I'd be scoring like 80 points off a region or something. And this cuts me down to like 50 or something to that effect. So there is some of that type of thinking going on. But the choices are really simple. You essentially only have maybe 20 choices throughout the game. You're essentially, which tile do I choose? And then where do I place it? And where do I place it? It's usually pretty obvious. It's very light, nice components, quick family game. That's about all there's to say. Except I'll say that this is evidence that the Spiel des Jahres award is continually getting lighter and lighter and lighter and lighter and lighter. They used to pick fairly complex games back in the day, and they don't anymore. These are last few years have been pure filler, and this is another one that's just pure filler. That's King Domino.
Next year, the winner will be Candyland.
Thanks, Andy. So my thoughts that I would add to what Trent said, I think that was a really good description of King Domino. I think you actually talked about King Domino. Like, Trent, I'm really happy that you had that much to say about it, because I think it would have taken about as long to play King Domino as it would to like listen to your review of King Domino.
Yeah, it's a 10-minute game. It's 10 or 15 minutes.
It is so light. Like, when I was playing it, I just kept on thinking, like, there's nothing wrong with this game. It's fine. Is this really it? Like, this is all that I do. Like, there's nothing I'm missing here, right? It's just like, even calling them dominoes, I'm kind of like, I mean, maybe if they'd made the actual component like on plastic that looked like a domino and did like a screen print, I'd feel a little better about it being called King Domino. To me, it didn't even feel much like dominoes. That, like, just because a tile has 2 different sides to it doesn't make it a domino to me. I feel like there was, you know, like the fact that there's like 4 or 5 different terrains, and then there's crowns or no crowns on them. And I mean, to me, it didn't feel much like dominoes, but that's because on dominoes, I just expect to look down and see numbers on them. So far, all these things have been kind of like, I guess, criticism that's not all that important. But my main like confirmation of what Trent says is this game is incredibly light. Like light to the point that I would only want to play this with like a group of very young gamers. You know, I can't even see this like being pulled out in between games, like at a game night. I just like, to me, it's, I don't know. It just feels to me like there's just so little to it. You have your decisions are so filtered to what tiles come out at that time. In addition to that, you don't even have like knowledge of what tile is going to be next until you've already decided on your turn order for next time. So you're not able to make decisions in the future really at all, right, Trent?
Well, I mean, unless you've got the whole stack memorized and know what the next tile is going to be because of the number on the back.
Oh no, you take out 12 of them. You take out a certain amount of tiles so that you're not supposed to be able to do that. So
okay.
you're never going to be able to math out like this is what's in it. You can look like they have that sort of, like you mentioned, Carcassonne. You compared it to Carcassonne. Carcassonne also has like this sheet in its rules where it numbers, you know, like it tells you how many of every type of tile there is in the game. They have that in King Domino, but it's way more simple because it just comes down to like incredibly simple tiles. Like you're talking like there's 4 or 5 different terrains, and then there's most of them have 0 crowns on them. It's rare when your crown comes out, because if you can get, like in the game that I played, the player who won essentially had 1 territory that they were able to continually add on to at the expense of their entire rest of their game. And they were able to get more points from this 1 territory than either me or the third player made in everything they did. So, I mean, this game is really about trying to make that big contiguous area and get a point here and a point there, because every single one of those now becomes worth 10 points. Would you agree with that, Trent?
Yes, but Joe, I should point out the thing where you say you got to remove 12 tiles. That's only true for a 3-player game. With 4, you play with all of them.
Oh, so you don't remove any tiles in a 4-player game. Okay.
No.
So it's a little bit, I guess, more strategic at the higher player counts as the game goes on, because you could then math out what's there. But, I mean, yeah, but you're never going to have much knowledge until it gets towards the end. I mean, I like that there's no restrictions as to what you can put where. I think that's kind of nice that you can build in whatever direction, but that just seems so basic to me. Everything about this game felt incredibly basic, and I just felt kind of like I could play this again. I could not play it again. It's fine. It was like a solid meh. And usually when I look at the past, like Codenames won the Spiel des Jahres last year, and I don't think Codenames had that sort of like, you know, underlying strategy to it. Like there's some clever play in Codenames. I don't feel like there's that much clever play in King Domino. You're not given the option. Colt Express to me felt like it had like a goofy thematic equivalent, which would have been 2015, and I feel like that was cool. And then that maintaining that same sort of goofy thematic equivalent with Camel Up, which is kind of like a horse race. So
Camel
got,
Cup.
like,
Camel Cup.
Is it actually Camel Cup?
I have no idea. It's ambiguous on the box.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm reading it from the awards on Wikipedia, so
Okay.
it's they're wrong if I'm wrong. So. Yeah, and then before that, it was, I mean, there was Hanabi, which, I mean, there's a game that, like, that game really stretches your brain. So, I mean, it's been really interesting. To me, honestly, I'm very disappointed with this one winning the Spiel des Jahres. I feel like this is kind of like, almost like a filler year then for the Spiel des Jahres, if they're going to give it to King Domino. Like, there's just, there has to have been better games that came out. So.
Yeah. This is way too light. Unless this is what the award has become, and it's the filler award now.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm wondering, like, has it devolved further? Because as it looks on, maybe they're about to come out with another award that's like the medium gamer. You'll have your complex gamer award, which is still only going to go to, like, you know, something that would be medium complexity on BGG at best. You'll have your light game, which is now the complicated game, the Kinderspiel. And then now the Spiel des Jahres is going to be like, you know, this game can be played in 5 minutes, and it works for people who have to be watching YouTube as they're playing games.
Yeah, I don't know. But it's super light. It works well for a family with younger children, but don't expect it to be like a great game night game.
When I think of the Spiel des Jahres right now, I'm thinking of like Darwin's Evolution of Man in reverse a little bit.
Yeah. The funny thing is, like, I mean, I think when I used to think of Spiel des Jahres, I thought of games like Focus, just like an abstract game by Sid Saxon that was like a complete and total brain burner. And this is everything that's like the opposite.
Antithesis of this. Yeah, there's very little brain burned in this game.
Okay, we've beaten this one to death. Let's move on.
We have. Yeah, let's talk about another game here. Let's talk about, Andy, why don't you talk about the game that you have been playing quite a bit with an online 18xx group, right? And we got in our live chat here, we got, I think, one of your compatriots there.
Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about 1867. I can't remember if I've talked about this one before in a previous episode, but I've had a chance to give it a few more plays. This one is very interesting in the sense that it has minors, and so you get these minors. They can merge to become majors. When you want to start your companies at different points, you have to auction them. So you kind of say, I'm going to start a company here. Then you start bidding on that to decide who's going to start these minors. So you have an auction for that. There are private companies that you auction for. And basically the kind of funkiness in here.
What do they call it? The differences between 1830 and this game, they call those
the MacGuffins.
MacGuffins. What are the MacGuffins?
Yeah, so in this one, you don't start majors except later in the game. What you can do is you start minors, and you run these minors for a while, and you can merge two minor companies to become a major company, or you can convert straight from a minor into a major company. And that leads to some fairly interesting decisions because you kind of have an auction battle over these minors and where they start. And they're only going to start at a certain value, and then any overbid is just kind of wasted money. So it's a matter of like how worth it is it to you to do this. Now, the thing that I found more interesting about this last play was if you get to a certain part, your miners can actually be bought out from under you. You can get them nationalized if they lose a train. And this happened to a couple of mine. So I thought I was like way out of the game. And I'm like, oh, crap, how do I come back from this? So I tried the conversion. Just I'm going to change my miner straight over to a major, which then the major doesn't start as high on the stock market. But I was able to make up for this and really pull ahead. So this conversion mechanism is more valuable than I thought. And basically what I've learned about this game, it's a game about not valuing your companies as much as you should. Because if they do get nationalized, you get paid for their value. So it's not like it's just yanked out from under you. You can reinvest that money. So this game is about basically chucking things that aren't valuable, merging them to become more valuable, and so on and so on and so on. It's got some kind of funky trains in it. You can buy these like 2 trains that double value and things like that, which makes it kind of interesting. I think the only criticism I kind of have of it, and I welcome any 18xxer that knows more about this to definitely school me on this, because I sure as heck am not seeing it. The thing I'm kind of wondering on the game is whether the private companies are worth it. Because the private companies, they do pay you a certain amount. So if you could get them on the cheap, okay, maybe. But for the most part, they don't have any funky powers. Like if you buy them into a company, they just add 10 to the run for a specific city on the map. That's like the only power they have. So I don't know.
Weak sauce, man. That's like $10.
Yeah,
10, but that's 10 divided by 10, but divided by shares. So at most you're getting $6 off of it every operating round.
It doesn't add
terrible.
It doesn't add a lot, and I never felt like I had a company in such a surely good situation that I could afford to pillage it out. Maybe that's wrong play on my part. This is why I kind of, if an 18xx person who's played this more knows what you're really supposed to do with these, let me know, because right now I just don't see the value in really wasting much money on these private companies. It seems like the minor companies are going to have just better payouts in the end. Everything else about the game I kind of enjoyed and liked. I'm starting to get my head around it a little bit, and so I came in third in this last play, but it was a very close third. There wasn't a whole lot deviating first, second, and third in it. So I really did enjoy it, and I did like it. I think it's one I still want to play a little bit more. There's some really funkiness with the way the mergers work in this one. But overall, it is nicer mergers. It's not like 18 Ireland. That's the merger that punches you in the balls. So anyway, that's 1867. It's got some interesting stuff, and I definitely anyone who can tell me or critique what I'm saying I didn't like and tell me why I'm wrong about that and what you should be doing, throw that out on the guild. I would love to hear about it.
All right, Andy, what is the map here? What is the map in 1867? I don't know anything about the game, but these are questions I need to know to understand it.
Oh, it's in Canada.
Okay.
It's Western Canada. It's Western Canada. Montreal.
So like the Rockies, basically.
No,
like more like Toronto, Ontario.
That's not Western.
Western Canada as of the 1860s.
Oh, okay. All right. I got you. So we're talking I know what you're talking about. Okay, so like Toronto and stuff. Okay.
Right. And so there's some kind of interesting things with the maps. Like if you build certain routes, they'll pay like a bonus. There's no fixed starting spot for companies. So you just like pick up a miner and you put the token somewhere on the map and you're like, I'm going to start this miner here. My initial bid is $100.
What?
And
there's like these companies are not even tied to a specific place, so they're just kind of like.
No, yeah. So yeah, you just start bidding on miners and that.
Does it make it interesting, or does it feel like a kind of cop out on actually setting a backbone for the story for the players to then interact with? One of the things I read recently, actually just today, was that sometimes creativity happens best when working under constraints, and maybe like, is this an example of like, here, do what you want, be free, and everybody's just kind of like, well, everything's the same, so what matters?
There's definitely like better spots on the map in terms of what cities pay out what.
So then it's just a matter of turn order.
Well, no, because when you start the company, it then becomes an auction. So just because you say I'm starting this company doesn't mean you actually are going to get that company.
Not going to lie, that feels like a bit of a cop-out. That feels like I don't want to have to balance how much these companies are worth, so let's just let all the players do it. Agree or disagree with what I said?
There's plenty of 18xx's that do that. Basically, though, this was like an alternate expansion to a game called 1861. And in 1861, they did have fixed positions, and that one was in Russia. In this game, it was meant to be like a map that you use the companies for, so I don't know if that dictated some of the choices and positions and such. But I don't know.
So what's your biggest criticism with the game then, Andy? Just that the miners and privates feel like they should be more impactful?
No. The miners are fine. Like, that seems worth it to me. It's the privates I don't understand very well. And
how much does that impact your overall opinion of the game?
It lowers it a little bit, but I also I don't know. I guess in an 18xx, I never want to say that something doesn't belong there, because odds are it's an issue that I don't understand why it's there or how to use it. Not that it was a stupid idea to put it there. So, I could be totally off base here in how this works.
Have you played 1861?
No, I have not done 1861. It works in a very similar way. The games are not.
The privates basically lifted from 1861, right. So they'd be the same. All right, yeah. So you haven't played 1861. Trent, do you have any experience with 1861?
No, but I played in all of Andy's 1867 games, and I feel pretty similar to his comments. I will say it seems like every time I play 1867, I start off really well and somehow fumble the mid game, and I don't know why I'm fumbling.
Yeah,
I don't know why I'm fumbling. I haven't figured it out yet.
Yeah, I would agree with Trent. Like I think
Trent, when you say something like that, that means that you really like the idea of it. Like if you're still trying to figure a game out, that means it's like you guys say, like your buzzword is like opaque.
Yeah, there's some opaqueness to this one, I think.
Yeah, I'm just starting to like see the light as to what you do in the mid game of this game. But I think it's very much one of, you can't get too attached to a company. Like you got to be willing to chuck it for a monetary gain and future monetary gain. Because I think the first game I got very attached to my miners and saving them. And then in this third game, I know. And then this third game, Like, I got really upset when my miners got nationalized. I was like, dang it, I'm screwed. I'm out of this. But then I kind of cooled down and looked, okay, well, here's my finances. What can I do with this? And I really pulled it out. Like I said, I came in third but it wasn't by a whole lot.
Mm-hmm. So the statement that was shared by Joe Wiggins here at the Deep End podcast, he's participating in our live chat, was that he really prefers 1867 to 1861 because of that open start that I had mentioned earlier. He says that that's quite a strength there because it just allows so much kind of workability, and he says different strategies in engineering because of how dynamic that specific difference between 1861 and 67, how much that makes it. Anyway, sorry guys for that confusing way to say that, but anyway, that was basically what he said. Andy and Trent, both of you guys, I have one more question here, and that is 1861 was a game that, as I was spiraling out of control in my first game of 1830, my first 18xx game ever, this is about hour 8.5, when I started to realize like that the coffin was being nailed shut on top of me, that they said that 1861 tends to have a lot more of like, you're all able to do fairly well, and there isn't so much like of just dumping companies back and forth. Like, it tends to be a much more symbiotic relationship, or not symbiotic, but you know, like where you're not so much interacting. It's not as much that players can be a parasite from another player and suck off their lifeblood and reduce their company value. So they kind of recommended, they were like, well, your complaints with 1830 are that you got sharked. You should play 1861. Evaluate that.
I don't know. Yeah, I would say there's not really as much stock nastiness that's going to happen in 61 or 67, just because for a lot of the beginning of the game, you're working with these minor companies, and they're only one share companies, and you can't sell them. So it's very much about what miners you start where and how well you can operate and run them. So the majors don't even come out necessarily for, a few operating rounds. So yeah, it's really not about pillaging the company and dumping it and that kind of thing. So yeah, I would agree on that sense. It's a little bit more of a kindler, gentler in the game, in the terms you're not going to get sharked by a bunch of people. But
so it sounds to me like there is like a transition. It's a transition phase in the game, and players can kind of get better at that. And it's not going to be so much like people are kind of looking for weaknesses in everybody else's strategy. It's more like there's a transition, and how well you deal with that transition from minors to majors is going to be how well you ultimately succeed in the game.
Yeah, it's really about how do you get the most bang for the buck in that game. But, I mean, you can... Yeah. I mean, there's not a whole lot you can do in terms of shenanigans on that front, because by the time you're really buying other people's stock, assuming you're even doing that, things are pretty well on the way and they're going. Yeah, there's no way you're going to end up bankrupt or dead, I think, in this game, unless you really, really screwed up somehow. But, it's kindler, gentler, but it's still very thinky. Like, this is not an intro 18xx for somebody, I don't think.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot, Andy. That was 1867, which is kind of like the later version of 1861, which has actually been pretty highly regarded. It's very highly regarded by some pretty big names in 18xx out there.
Yeah, 67 is a very similar game from everything. I mean, they actually literally use the same rulebook with an addendum sheet that describes the changes for 67.
You can buy the standalone now from All Aboard, though.
Yeah, that's the one. I have the standalone.
Yeah. It used to be like Russian companies in Canada, so people would joke that it's when Russia took over Canada and built a rail network.
Because they just used the 1861, which is set in Russia. They just totally co-opted everything, and
I am starting the Comrade Railway or something.
Soviet Canada, railroads run you.
Nice. Well, you could do just about anything you want to with the game system that I'm going to be reviewing here for my game. And By the way, how many stars there on that transition? Okay. I'm going to be talking about D&D. Anyway, I'm talking about D&D. So Dungeons and Dragons. I finally played an RPG, a straight-up RPG. It was a one-shot session with co-host Jonathan Pierce here. And anyway, for his birthday, he created his own sandbox scenario. And together with 3 other adventurers, I took on this dungeon that he had made. And I'm going to give you guys my thoughts on the system itself and what I think shines in it and what are things about it that I really enjoy and if there are any complaints I have. So basically, what to me shined about D&D was every time that we got to sort of deal with like exposition in the game. Like every time that we were in a room, and what was so cool about it was just that we were just plopped there. So every time that we were given open options, I felt like I was just so thrilled to be able to ask any sort of a question. You know, like we're in a room with pillars. What color are these pillars? Oh, they're all blue. Why are they blue? What if we try to knock down a pillar? Okay, we've got to roll dice. Okay. And every time that it was like this sort of novel concept for us to be in a new situation, and every time that we got to interact, the fact that there was an individual there that was sort of like, I would almost say like a guide rail, because really what I would say D&D is it's like an experience in the vacuum of an individual's imagination. And if you are just left out there with nothing, like if there was no person there and you were just, there has to be a dungeon master. There has to be a person who's keeping you grounded to the story, who's making sure that you are continually advancing through a narrative, that they at least have some sort of a framework of how it's going to go. So those were the parts that I loved in D&D, meaning like we were in a room for the first time. That was when I really got excited. It was like, okay, cool. Let's start looking at things. Let's start exploring this room. Let's start trying to interact with different things. And every time that we had to like roll some dice and see what happened, it was always accompanied by our dungeon master, the great Jonathan, telling us that like, this is what happened. This is why this is a part of the story. So all the dice did there was form like a part of this ongoing developing story. Now he knew the direction it was going in, and none of us did. And that to me was the Christmas present at the heart of D&D. Like had he just told us like, okay guys, this is a general idea of what this dungeon's going to have. Like here's kind of like, here's all the enemies you're going to face. Here's what the rooms are going to be like. Here's this, that would have taken everything out of it. Everything that I think that I personally enjoyed. So it was really great when we got to get those little snippets of exposition. Like, it was all based on this really cool, he had kind of like taken one of his favorite fantasy settings for a video game and then made that his very first sandbox RPG scenario. So like, that's what I loved about it, is just like the times that we got to spend interacting with John. And John was like, he was theatrical about things. He would do voices, he would do sound effects, and it was like one of those things where if I was looking down and I wasn't looking directly at him, I felt like that sound effect just felt so like authentic, I would say. And that's his theatrical capabilities. And I would say he really does well in the theatrics. So basically, every time like that we were rolling, I never felt like all this pressure to roll incredibly high. I felt like almost like sometimes I wanted to see an ebb and flow between high rolls and low rolls, because I wanted to give Jonathan the ability to explore different sides of the story that he was making continually come out. Now, one thing that Jonathan noticed as we were going is that we were kind of running short on time. And so he started to do anything I think a great DM does, which is prioritize what parts of the story are best. And so he had a couple of rooms that we would have entered in and would have been fairly well copies of earlier rooms, or at least close enough to where they're just combinations of things we've seen before. And he decided to just outright skip those. Now, if we had been playing through a scenario in a book, like say in Descent, we'd have no choice. We would be kind of stuck to that story. And that's what's so great about Dungeons and Dragons, is that you are there with another individual who is socially reading group and giving you guys what is perfect for you. And it is to me, the real designer of any RPG isn't so much the person who makes the rule book that has all the different roles. All this stuff is just schematics and frameworks. I think the real genius behind any RPG is the dungeon master, your game master, the person who puts all that stuff out. So it is, to me, like, those were the incredible things about it. Now, whenever we were about 4 or 5 combat rounds into a specific fight, it started to get to the point where I was just kind of like, all right, well, let's just kind of keep rolling this. And, you know, I mean, because like, it's either going to be us or it's going to be them. And I just kind of want to get to I don't want to keep spending these sort of like rounds in the middle where we've got like 80 HP, you know, we've got 80 hit points, and this enemy can only do like up to 20, you know, depending on there being like not incredible rolls. So it's like, you know, at those times I was just kind of like, let's keep advancing, because the mechanisms, when you get down to it, are very much just a platform for storytelling. So what it basically made me feel was, in general, I'm very excited to try more RPGs, because you know that there's going to be that DM there, that person, that sort of like guiding light. And to me, that's the amazing part. So in general, you guys, what do you think about that?
I have a question.
Okay.
Did you ever roll a 1?
Yes, I did, but I never rolled a 1 in a check where it would have been like my I rolled a lot of 2s, and John was actually getting like, he was like, come on, man, you keep rolling like bad, but never like so bad that I can make something funny happen. He's like, you're just making this boring. And I was like, because I kept on rolling 2s, and 2s were definitely not what I needed to like kill these monsters or do any damage to them, you know. It was just kind of like uninteresting. Like, had I rolled a 1, it would have been like, you know, you're going to now roll, and now you see if you damage yourself. And yeah, that's basically, does that answer your question?
Yes. One time I rolled a 1 in a game like that, and I ended up killing my companion's cat. So,
You know what the best critical failure I ever had was in a crappy D&D game where the dungeon master basically portaled in his 20th level character to do a fight for us, so he could just show off how cool his character was. And it was against a vampire, and I tried to stab the vampire with a stake and critically failed and stabbed his character in the back through the heart and killed him.
It was a vampire character?
No, it was like this. Yeah, and then basically we had fun because he had his like character sheet there. Then we got to look over and like loot all his stuff.
Yeah, and it's those type of things, like those type of memories, that I think are so great about it. Like, you know, that's why when it comes down to it, you're, you know, like, I think Jonathan had one of the best statements when he said, Descent is an RPG with a terrible DM. And as has been mentioned in our comments here, if your DM is bad, your game is going to suck. Like, that's just what it comes down to.
Yeah.
I mean, it's taken a big hit, though. This actually leads me to a really funny thing. Like, this last Sunday, there was a piece of paper up in our game, at one of the places we play games at. We play Sunday night games, which both of you guys were gone. But there was this paper that was posted, and somebody who was new noticed it, and it said on it, 5 players looking for DM. And this guy said, you know what that should be? It should be 4 players plus DM looking for one more adventure, because one of those guys needs to pony up. Because it's like, yeah, you know,
yep.
Right, Trent?
I agree completely.
Yeah, you're taking a hit for the team every time you're DM, and I think a lot of people, like, they end up in that situation where, like, they've got so good at DMing that that's the only thing that they can ever do. You know, they can't actually be an adventurer in anybody else's game.
Some people reach a point where they like doing that, but I think it's pretty gutsy to be like, this is what I expect, is that you're going to come in and be our DM, because that's a lot more work than being an adventurer.
Oh, God, yeah. Usually most RPG groups I know, they have like 2 or 3 going and they rotate.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a large commitment. It's a really, like, what it did more than anything was give me tons and tons of respect to anybody who's ever DM'd before and done it well, Andy. Not done it, you're like, I'm going to kill you, I hate you guys.
Oh, yeah, no. I tried DMing. I suck at it. I can't improvise with crap. But no, honestly, the thing I can say about RPGs here is honestly, the best and most memorable role-playing sessions didn't even have dice rolling or combat in them. It was just character development. Mm-hmm. So it was really cool. But yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a really great way to kind of put a little cap on our discussion of D&D. So where I'm at right now with D&D is I'm kind of working on some of the people in my life I think might be willing to play an RPG, and I know I've got a person or two. It's like kind of almost a little puzzle I'm trying to solve, right? I want to somehow get my wife involved, but any RPG she ever plays would have to be entirely grounded in reality.
You play No. You need to play something. I know your wife well enough to say this. Don't play D&D with her. Don't. That's not
exactly. That's what she's not gonna
play Fiasco with her. Go look into Fiasco. That would be right up her alley. That would be way better choice for her than I think anything else I can think of.
Yo.
It's grounded in reality. It's very oriented towards the storytelling rather than the dice chucking. It's DM-less, so everybody gets to play as equals. It has a really good system for making the DM-less work.
Yeah.
I'd look into Fiasco.
Is it using the Fate system? Because I've heard some really good... Oh, okay.
No, Fiasco is its own thing.
Okay. All right, well, yeah, I'm trying to... The thing is, like, the really good DM that I know, like an amazing DM, is really, really likes and prefers to do Dungeons & Dragons. And I feel kind of like, to me, the DM is like the guy that's driving the car. So whoever's driving the car, at least in my book, whoever's putting in the time to drive is going to be the person who chooses what's on the radio. You know, like if you're going to sit passenger, you can't be like, I'm going to DJ this session and listen to all of my favorite songs if you are not driving. So I feel like it should be up to the DM to choose the setting. But then at the same time, I know that my wife would never play in an RPG that was set in the Dungeons & Dragons universe, or even just like Star Wars. Like, she would just not be interested. She would really, I think, though, like you said, Trent, be interested in something that's more based around reality, which it sounds like Fiasco is.
Yes. Fiasco basically can be whatever you want it to be.
Cool. Well, hopefully one day, man, because I really I feel like I got the itch now. I got the itch because that was the first time I've ever felt that way in a game. It wasn't like Gloomhaven, even though it's my #1 game, does not do what that game does. I feel like there's no way to do those pen and paper RPGs. Like, they are giving you something totally different from even the best video game versions of RPGs.
I feel like that's something me and Trent have been saying for a year or so now.
No, I'm saying it now for the first time. Yeah. Everything I say is innovative. As a teacher, Andy, you should know. What do they say? They say great art is stolen, good art is created. Right?
Yeah. I teach science. We don't do art.
Oh my goodness, Trent, you dropped this in the comments and never said it out loud. Fiasco is basically a Coen Brothers movie as an RPG?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me, man? I love Fargo. I love like almost every Coen Brothers movie I've ever seen has just been amazing. Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? The most recent one, the one with the George Clooney commune. Well, I don't want to give up too much, but yeah, was that one?
That basically is what Fiasco is. It's like it makes you play a Coen Brothers movie, and it's DM-less.
I know the one they did on Tabletop involved like everyone burning to death in a disco.
Oh, they did. I know which one they did. I bet I haven't never seen it. There's like a handful of settings that come in the book, and I have a good idea of which one they did. They did New York 77, I bet.
Yeah.
Everybody burning to death in a disco sounds like a reasonable conclusion to that one.
Sounds like actually one of the more family-friendly conclusions of that specific scenario. And moving right along here, that was D&D.
Speaking of burning to death in buildings, onto our topic. No.
Yeah, we're gonna see exactly where this shoots. So, anyway, Andy, you suggested this. I'm gonna let you introduce it.
Yeah, Andy.
Andy. I think Andy is frozen in time. I think that Andy just got like blocked off of his internet because his image looks frozen. So first of all, thanks to Josh for editing this out. And this is a time for us to all look at the comments and say it's good to see Adam, Daniel, TC, Joe Wiggins, Kyle. It's good to see all you guys. Hi. This might might make it in the final episode. Who knows? Anyway, it looks like Daniel brought up that sort of Coen Brothers. And have you ever heard, Trent, of the End of the World stuff from Fantasy Flight?
Yep, I played those too. They're similar one-offs. My favorite like one-off one is probably 10 Candles. That one's really good. 10 Candles is neat because part of the storytelling thing is you play in a dark room with 10 candles, and as a bad event happens, you put out a candle.
Ooh, this sounds like kind of like Dread. Have you ever tried that one?
Yes, that's the one that's it's Jenga.
Okay, yeah.
Yep.
DCC, what's that stand for?
DCC. I'm not sure what that is.
Anyone play DCC? Adam brought it up in the chat. I don't know what it stands for.
I'm not sure what DCC is, not right off the top of my head.
Dungeon Crawl Classics.
No. My memory serves me correctly. It's basically like early edition D&D.
Well, from what I understood, like historically, D&D, like when it was first made, like was like kind of simple, and then the first like mass market edition or the first like widely available edition of D&D from Gary Gygax, which I think is his name, was like by some company that had this horrible sounding name. It was like something about tactical rule systems or something like that. And apparently it was like you needed like a degree, like an advanced degree in mathematics to understand how the resolution worked.
I'm not sure about that, but okay.
Yeah, and I think like, what I've heard is a lot of times like dungeon DMs tend to have different preferences or different sort of gravitational pulls depending on when they got into the system. So when did you get in, Trent? And you've DM'd before, right? Or
yeah, I've DM'd several times. I used to play a lot in like high school. Back then we played AD&D.
Second edition?
Yeah.
No, second edition or first edition?
Second. It was pretty fresh when I was in high school, if I remember.
Yeah, that's about right for me too. Yeah. Second edition was the one that's like the rules almost got in the way half the time. Jesus.
Yep.
Well, Andy, I kind of almost did a drum roll, like, Andy, take it away, and then
my internet crapped like right there.
Your face was frozen. It was like, Andy, I don't think you can hold that face that long.
I have to give a quick shout out to my favorite AD&D second edition setting, Spelljammer.
Oh, Spelljammer was freaking crazy. D&D.
I can't participate, but I can read comments. Dragonlance and Ravenloft, are those second edition settings?
Yeah. The only thing that
Dragonlance is like your literally generic King Arthur style fantasy. Ravenloft is like gothic horror. Spelljammer was like pirate ships in space controlled by psychics.
Okay. Pirate ships in space controlled by psychics.
Yeah, like literally the gnomes had ships that were powered by giant hamsters running in like paddle wheels.
Yeah, it was just Spelljammer was someone's acid dream or something.
Yeah, really.
To pilot the ships, you had to put this like mind control device on your head and like flew it using psychic energy and stuff.
Yep. And then I had like this weird ass tactical combat system, like almost a miniatures battle going on.
Yeah, ships. And the thing is, the guy that was our DM when I was in school used to use Spelljammer as the way to take us between settings. Like a Spelljammer ship would land in Ravenloft and take you to Dragonlance or something to that effect.
Wow.
Yeah.
It just sounds like the whole thing is an acid dream at that point.
It was crazy.
You all take a pill, and then...
if you really wanted to play generic fantasy, i.e. we're playing Middle Earth, but slightly legally distinctly different enough that we can't get sued, it was Forgotten Realms.
Yeah.
Dragonlance was slightly different, only in that it was terribly fun that they didn't have halflings, but instead had these things like halflings, but we're all freaking kleptomaniacs.
Like kleptomaniacs and like stealing things?
Yes.
Yeah, like they were all compulsive stealers, like the entire race.
Wow.
Like anything that lasted over a week in the home was considered a family heirloom. One
That's
of these once and had a bag of holding. Let's just say I kleptomaniac to the Paladin's warhorse at one point.
Well, what isn't it like if you end up with the bag of holding in like a magical environment.
Oh no, the bag of holding in the portable hole just instantly killed you. You like got sucked into transdimensional space.
Blows up or something. Yeah. So anyway, now that we're all back together again here, I wonder how much of this will end up making it in, but it's been interesting to read through and hear about all these things. So, Andy, we are now starting our topic here, which is all about review, like ethics and biases that might be because of some sort of compensation. And you had kind of jumped out and said like, hey, this is kind of a big topic right now. Could you explain that?
To some degree. It's a big topic, but I see lots of people talking about it, but not like a lot of specifics about it. So I'm kind of like that. Oh, well, hell, let's throw our 2 cents in. What the hell? But I don't know. But yeah, there's a lot of discussion going on about this idea of sort of whether being compensated for a review makes you biased or whether it's okay or not. The thing that's just kind of weird is like everyone seems to be getting all up in arms about it, but no one's really like saying like, oh, these people are definitely like shills and they're getting paid to do their reviews. And I don't know. I just find it interesting that like this seems to have kind of flown out of the woodwork. But it does make you think, because like I've had a lot of discussions with other board game reviewers sort of on Twitter and in person about the idea of bias and whether you can really be unbiased, because I think a lot of people think that as a reviewer, you must be completely free of bias to be justified and, you know, considered worth listening to. And I've had interesting arguments and discussions about the phenomenon of bias and whether humans can really be that way, you know, based on my science background, because I'm a science teacher, biology major, and, you know, the 2 areas of most fascination to me about humans and nature is either space combined with theoretical physics, because it makes my brain melt and I curl up in a fetal position on the floor because I don't think the universe can really be that way, or studying the human brain and how us as humans just approach things. Like I've done a lot of questions on the Guild and on Heavy Cardboard forum, not because I really am interested in a sense what people say, like your favorite game. Like I'm more interested in trying to use that as a way to figure out what people think, because I just find human thinking to be immensely fascinating. So I thought, well, let's talk about this idea of bias in reviewing and what we do in this board game media thing, and what things could influence our behavior and what we can do to mitigate that, or even if we should mitigate that. So I just kind of threw that out there as a topic because, once again, I'm fascinated to see what different people think about it. I have my views, but they may not be what the majority are. So, and people might be surprised about what my views are on it. So anyway, like I said, the easy answer is, well, everyone else seemed to be talking about it. The complex answer is it's an interesting topic just to see how us as media people approach this thing, you know? So I guess that's where I came from it. And so where should we start with it?
Trent, do you have a good answer to that?
I guess in all of that, I lost the thread of what Andy's actual question was.
No, it was just about, you know, like the review bias and ethics. Like my question to him was, you know, like why about like, you know, what his interest was in proposing this as a topic. And he basically said the cop-out answer is because everybody's talking about it. And now at this point, we're kind of wondering, you know, where to start in terms of like, where should we start this discussion about review bias, paid reviews, review copies? Where do we draw the line here? And is there even solid ground to draw a line in, or are we just drawing lines in the sand?
Okay, how about this? Does a review copy add bias to the review? If you receive a review copy, does it alter what the review will be like?
Do you want to answer that?
I have never received a review copy of a game, so I can't really answer that.
I'm going to say this, and I've received, you know, in full disclosure, one review copy from Capstone Games when I did Lingdom. my answer to this is going to be weird because there's a lot of people in board game media that say that they are not biased, that they will call a bad game when they see a bad game, and that might be true. But here's the thing. My argument to these people, and most people have been, there is no such thing as being unbiased. You cannot possibly be that way. You as a human being automatically are influenced by biases, either consciously or subconsciously. So the fact that you're given a review copy of a game, you were given an item. Therefore, that has intrinsic value to you. That has some value to you given. They've done many experiments on this. That immediately tweaks your thinking to a certain amount of degree. I think the danger in reviewing is to not acknowledge that bias exists. So, like, one of my things I like to do, and I think I did this, if I didn't, I meant to, and that was an oops, but to admit, I got a review copy of this game. I think that it behooves you to do that as a reviewer, just so people can kind of think about this. But if you're going to say you're an unbiased person, that, you know, getting this doesn't sway your opinion, I'm going to call BS on that, because they have done lots of scientific studies on this very phenomenon and proved that humans cannot be unbiased, that we have unnatural, or not unnatural, but unknown, sometimes subconscious things that will push us one direction or another. We are not robots. We have, you know, different experiences that lead us one direction or another. I think, though, you can do your best to acknowledge this and basically be open about it. And thus, if you're thinking about it, it shouldn't hopefully influence your opinion too much. But the other question, I guess, on review copies too is there a difference between you requesting a review copy and you being given one out of the blue? Because I think that changes things. Because, for example, when I requested a review copy of Lignum from Capstone Games, like, I was already pretty sure I was going to like that game. Like, everything I'd seen about it was like, yeah, I'm going to like that game. There was really low odds in me, like, basically pounding on the game and saying it's crap, because I had thought this game was good enough to basically request the review copy. So do you think that means anything? Is it different whether you're just given one out of the blue or whether you request it?
That's a really good question. Trent?
I think, of course, there are hidden biases. I think we all have lots of hidden biases. I think that receiving a review copy, it triggers some. I'm sure that it does. I think it's very, very, very hard to quantify that. I do think that people are not being fully honest with themselves if they say that it never occurs, period, no matter what. I am fully unbiased, blah, blah, blah. I think that, like, our past gaming experiences are a bias. I think everything's a bias. I think that the point of a review is that you can't just rely on one review. You have to rely on a lot of reviews, period, no matter who you're listening to. Because if you buy into just the reviews of one reviewer, you're accepting their biases as your own. The only way to counter that is to look at a lot of reviews.
Right. Well, that basically goes, you know, to the idea of, you know, when I tell my students when we're talking science or something like that, they've asked me before, because we'll talk about, you know, what's a valid fact, what's not, checking multiple sources. And I always tell them, I'm like, you should never believe anyone when they just tell you something outright. If they tell you something, you should cross-check that with someone else or other. And, you know, they've asked me, they're like, so does that mean we should question everything you teach us? And I'm like, yeah, it does. You should cross-check me. But, you know, I agree with Trent there. I think you got to look at multiple sources. I don't think you can look at one. And I think, you know, I agree with him too. I think to not acknowledge bias, that then runs you the risk of being more affected by it. Joe has mute on.
You got it. There you see me like talking. I had mute on so that I could type really quick because I'm trying to like. There's been a lot of interesting comments, and not all of them we're going to be able to read, but like definitely listening to them and using them to sort of formulate what I'm going to say. The main thing I wanted to say is I'm going to have to weigh in my 2 cents at some point. And I find myself in a very interesting position psychologically at this point. I am a very biased individual because I just spent, from the moment I woke up this morning until about 15 minutes before recording this podcast, taking care of behind-the-scenes work that's all a part of a transition between of taking over, like, those that don't know, I'm going to be, I have already been the one of the co-hosts of the Longview podcast. I'm doing the Good, the Bored, and the Ugly full, 100% of what we've always done, and the Longview podcast is something I kind of fill in the gaps with. The thing is, though, the transition of the website and with the hosting, like I learned how to use Notepad today to write code to be able to host the podcast on our own website, because up until now, there's a really gracious and awesome individual that has been hosting and pretty much taking care of all this behind-the-scenes work for the Longview podcast. This is stuff I don't even know how to do for the Good, Bored, and the Ugly because we have it hosted somewhere else. So I'm in this position where I have just spent like my entire waking day. I literally did not even go outside in the sunlight today because I was sitting in front of a computer screen taking care of like website design, stuff that I am in no way like emotionally rewarded for. It is like, oh my goodness. Like I at this point, like, I feel like I just have a really big headache because I've been staring at a screen all day. I love this sort of podcasting back and forth. I love the community participation, but the part of the job that I really that I never got into it for was the sort of like creation behind closed doors. And that's something where you almost need like a team of individuals. When you don't have that team, you end up with people sort of working out of their comfort zone. And I would say that's mainly what I'm saying, is not that it's bad work, not that it's something that I never want to do, but I'm out of my comfort zone learning how to use Notepad to code in like all the different ways that iTunes needs to read how you host an episode. And so here's the way that I feel based on that, guys. Like, it's a lot of work. And I'll tell you right now, a lot of that work is stuff that you don't want to do, that the person who has come out to do it is not either prepared for or not predisposed to enjoy doing. And we are in a hobby that is about enjoying yourself. It's about having fun, the F word. However, it still makes me think, like I agree that like if you are given a review copy, you got to disclose it. I think it was mentioned in our comments earlier. Daniel said like the FCC literally requires, this is a big thing that blew up for video games, where you have to say if you were compensated for a review. Now, here's a question for you guys. Do you think that the movie reviewer, do you think that Roger Ebert, who was one of my favorite movie reviewers, or Leonard Maltin, who's one of my current favorite ones, I mean, these are great reviewers. Do you think they paid for their ticket to the movie?
No.
Is that affecting their opinion of the movie?
No, but let me say this. Let me throw this back at you. Can Leonard Maltin or Roger Ebert go to that movie and then walk out of it with something that they can immediately resell that has value?
Exactly. They're not being, it's like an experience. So as long as all you're doing is the experience. But here's the thing, Trent, let's take that a step further. What if I am flown to a convention that's put on by a board game company, I'm given a whole bunch of food that I eat, and I consume it, and I'm given a great time, and I'm allowed to stay in a great hotel, and I go home and I can't sell any of that? How is that different from getting something that you can sell monetarily?
It isn't. It's all bias.
Okay. The next question I have
is bias. So
yeah. Mm-hmm. So what happens? What about this situation? What if I am going? What if I'm about to my yearly subscription to my website is up, right? Because it costs money to host. It costs money to host this podcast. It costs money to host the Longview. Like I recently, together with TC, had to divide like a 3-figure sum that was larger than I anticipated having to pay with TC to be able to host the website. And what happens if I say like, hey, who wants to help me with this? And a board game publisher jumps up and says, I'll give to that. Like we'll donate that.
I think that's the same as I'm handing you cash because that's effectively what it is.
Yeah.
So but what about like if they give you the review copy? Is it better or worse than that? Is it? I mean, are these just all levels of gray? What is this?
Yeah, it's all levels of gray. I think
Yeah,
all of it is
absolutely.
levels
It's
of
a
gray.
complex situation. Because to me, there's probably going to be a difference in my mind, how I think about it. If I'm given one versus I request one versus I've just bought this game on my own and I'm looking at it. I think if you
Is that Andy's gone? There goes Andy. If you blank. Hey, would anybody like to start a drive? Publishers invited to get Andy a better internet connection. Andy, what were you saying? What you said there?
To me, I think there's going to be a difference of if I'm given one versus I request one versus I have just bought the game on my own. I think the most likely to have the least bias is that I've bought the game on my own. However, there's already bias in there because
I'm not going to buy a game that looks like crap. I'm not going to buy it.
Yeah, I'm not going to buy a game I don't like just to go beat it to death on a podcast.
And let's take that a step further, though. I'm not going to request a review copy of a game I'm not going to like because, as Jonathan Pierce is here in our chat, he couldn't make it to record, but I was glad to see him here in our chat. He said, "I'm going to keep pumping out reviews and accepting review copies until they start blacklisting me for being honest." So, I mean, like, if I'm going to get a review copy, like, I can only imagine, like, it being really stressful to be in, like, a situation where you're actually getting review copies that you didn't request. Because, like, holy crap, you're getting these review copies, and these are for games that, like, it is literally, like an obstacle for you to have to overcome. It's like, oh, that's a type of game I really don't like. For example, Tom Vassell, every time he's had to review, like, in a complicated Euro game, I bet that part of his bias where it's like, this was put on my table for me to play. This is not a game that I'm interested in. It's a game that I kind of have to because I have these people who listen to me, and they want to hear about this. And I was given this game by a publisher. You know, like where do we draw the line here? Because he could be upset because he's got this review copy and because he didn't seek it out, and maybe it's getting that time in the limelight that the publisher wanted. But, you know, is a negative review coming from Tom Vassell really gonna help a game? And I'm just using Tom Vassell as as any reviewer that has a large audience. He's just maybe one of the most, like, hobby level, most well-known game reviewers. So
yeah, I mean, I guess I look at it as all factors of gray, and when it comes to review copies, I don't know if there's, like, you know, I don't think of it as, oh, you got this review copy, therefore you're not to be trusted or you're evil or anything. Like, that's not where I'm going with this, and I don't think there's any criticism you can make on it. I think when it comes to that, though, it's just a lot more, like I said, shades of gray. I think the best thing you can do to be as fair as possible to it is just acknowledge that I got a review copy.
Yeah, if you disclose everything, you know, if you try to disclose your subjective bias, I think that's a good thing. I think, though, that, Andy, we should take this a step further. If you're disclosing things like I got this as a review copy, I think you need to disclose your prior interest level in a specific game's theme. Because, like, let's put it like this. I think that the Game of Thrones card game has this amazing quality to me that shoots it to the top of my list, and that's because I was not that interested in Game of Thrones when I started getting into it. As a matter of fact, it was Trent and John that their interest in the game kind of, like, fueled me to be at least susceptible to when I saw the availability to sort of, like, get an entry in. And then by playing the game, I then started reading the books, and it's become, like, one of my favorite things. I now sit there and wait for these episodes, or the new episodes. Season 7, episode 5 is coming out this next weekend. I mean, like, I'm super excited for that to come out. So what type of bias is that? Because, like, had I already been a huge fan of Game of Thrones, the card game, or Game of Thrones, the system, does that mean that my opinion of Game of Thrones, the card game, is less? Or, like, how would you evaluate my bias in that situation? Either of you guys.
I don't know what you're getting at. You've lost again. Like I'm lost the thread here.
Okay, let me say this. Let me say this. If I am a huge Star Wars fan and a Star Wars games comes out, because I think that this is almost like the most important theme that people say, like, oh, slap Star Wars on it and it'll sell and it'll be highly rated. You know, like for example, to what level is Star Wars Rebellion? And I've never played it, so I am asking a question here. I'm not judging this game. To what level is Star Wars Rebellion a rated number 5 on Board Game Geek because of a predisposition for people that enjoy board games as a group to enjoy the Star Wars as a franchise?
Oh, absolutely. Having that theme on it will help a game in almost any respect. And I think it's fine when you are reviewing to talk about your taste. Like, for example, if somebody sent me a review copy of some new light Euro game, I would make
King Domino.
King Domino.
Thank you.
Hey, I probably wouldn't feel any obligation to review it, but let's say I did and I bashed it. I mean, I would follow that or either start that with, this game is not in my wheelhouse. Like, you know what I mean? So I would explain my tastes, because otherwise it doesn't make sense. Like if you put me in front of, any light Euro coming out these days, I might be surprised. Like, Mexico, we played that. I didn't expect much. And then at the end, I'm like, holy crap, there's actually something to this. But a lot of them I would say, hey, I didn't like this game. That doesn't mean it's necessarily a crappy game. It's just not in my wheelhouse. If I did a review like that, that kind of thing. I think it's good to acknowledge what kind of influences you have on things to people and be upfront about it and be open about it so that they kind of know where you're coming from. So for me, like when people know I'm going to review a game, for the most part, they know it's going to be a heavier game. It might probably going to be a train game in a lot of situations.
No, never 18x.
And,
no,
and
that is a trend.
or on an odd occasion, it might be a kid's game because I have kids. That biases me towards that sometimes. But I own that and I acknowledge that. So, I don't play a new map of Ticket to Ride and go, I'm going to look at this fair and impartial, because no, I'm going to be like, why was I playing this on a game night?
Andy, hey, I've got a game for you. It's called Dominion.
Dominion? Yeah.
I think you'll really like it.
Yeah. Probably not. I don't know.
I loved it, man. In our guild, somebody shared like a list regarding our last episode on light games for heavy gamers, and they were like, these are light games, so games that are quick and easy to explain, that still give you good decisions that can work for like your heavier level gamers. And they mentioned Dominion on that list, and I was about ready to like just give that person like all, like put that person in my will as like, you can have all of my games, you can have all of my stuff. So, and I just thought it was hilarious. But anyway, the thing, guys, that we keep coming back to, that I keep thinking about here, is that, yeah, your bias is such a huge and you can't just trace it down. I mean, yes, you can look at a review. Here's what I think is the worst, is when somebody says, and I'm going to, I guess, call this a condemnation if you will, but if somebody gets direct monetary compensation for a game, and that can be, or not direct, I mean, there's ways of indirectly compensating monetarily that can also create conflicts of interest. But if they don't disclose those conflicts of interest, they're being disingenuous, and they are doing a disservice to just the reviewer, like just the entire community of reviewers at large. Because as Adam mentioned in our comments here, this guy, there's people all over the place that are looking for ways to get free review copies, and they're not going to be, sitting there telling everybody, here is my unbiased, honest opinion on this game that I got paid $400 to do a review copy for. Now, I think where people generally draw the line, being a member of the Facebook Board Game Reviewers group, is that if you are doing a walkthrough video or a simply put like showing the mechanisms and the game off,
basically.
Yeah, not a review, but essentially a preview, that in that case, it's okay to accept money.
I would agree
And
with
that like, even if you're only talking about 5 minutes of video, if you're shooting it through a very high, like a expensive camera, you're talking about expensive programs, expensive editing materials, hardware and software, that it's okay in that situation. Now, I want to stop this for a second and ask you, Trent, how do you feel about that?
Sure. I mean, I assume that like the guy that does the watch I played videos gets paid. Otherwise, why would he do it?
Oh, Rodney Smith, is that it?
I assume he's got to be getting compensated for that. I mean,
yeah. Well,
and I don't blame him. He's not reviewing it. He's not putting on an editorial voice.
Right. So, and I think didn't Edward at Heavy Cardboard, maybe it was in Slack or something, but I heard he got really upset because a company wanted him to do one of his walkthroughs where he does the whole rules teach and all that. And they wanted to use that to like launch their Kickstarter as the main video, but then not pay him for that. And he got really upset about that because he's like, that's not a review. You're asking me to produce content specifically for you for your financial gain. I should be compensated for that. And I would agree with that. If you're using that as a promotional item for you to make more money, yeah, probably should. But yeah, and I like, is it weird? Are there people actually arguing that people shouldn't get paid for previews and walkthroughs? Or
here's my question though: has anybody? So I know that the big place that most people are pretty quick to condemn is if somebody is getting monetary compensation for something that is called a review with their opinion. Yeah. Correct? And that I think that's what I'm getting from here. That's what I'm getting from our chat, that like, if you are taking money for doing something that you are then selling as your opinion, that essentially in that case, you are kind of like, you're selling your own opinion, you're selling your own personality to the highest bidder. And that, at that point, it really depends on your own audience. I think at that point, it's really your audiences. Your audience should be the thing that's sort of like moderating you there. Because if you're still getting an audience, like your audience is either a very like revolving door of different individuals. And the thing that I keep coming back to is we've mentioned Kickstarter. Like Kickstarter has some reviews, and I don't know at what point, they're like paid reviews or what, from individuals that then do not mention any sort of monetary compensations. Anybody, and this includes anybody in the chat, which there's a little bit of a delay, so we might get a minute. We might figure out about this later. Has anybody ever seen a review video that specifically mentioned monetary compensation coming from the person that gave this game? Like they gave me this game, I received $200 to do this review. Has anybody ever seen that? I don't think I have personally, even though I've seen a lot of videos in my time. I've never seen any reviewer that will list, like, I got paid to do this review.
My understanding is that none of them actually did it in videos, but it was later uncovered that some of them had.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the thing.
I'm afraid of like naming names here, so I'm going to stop at that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we're not here to like throw anybody under the bus, but this is an ethical question, and I think that's relevant though for you to say, Trent.
Yeah, that's the thing that always kind of like weirded me out about this was, like, people were bringing it up like it was this widespread, huge thing, but then it was just thrown out there. Like nobody's, specifically saying X, Y, Z or who, what, where was doing this. But it seems like something that a lot of people are upset about, or that it's a major problem. So one of the things I was wondering with this really is it actually a big deal? Was this pretty widespread? Were there a lot of people doing this? Or how did this even, like, where did people find this out? Like, the other thing that always weirded me out, and I don't know where this came on the financial scale, was that big falling out that happened on Tabletop like a year or so ago, where Will Wheaton kind of like lost his crap on Twitter and his blog about it, where apparently his producer was basically taken some kind of kickback from game companies to guarantee them a Tabletop episode, because a Tabletop episode basically,
it's like a Spiel des Jahres almost.
Like, well, yeah, like Tabletop.
Usually people figure out about board games you know, the real modern board gaming through tabletop, then Tom Vassal, and then like somewhere out in outer space in the far reaches is this lovely little ecosystem. And I'm so thankful to have everybody here in the chat and you guys here with me. But yeah, like if somebody's on tabletop, they get tons and tons of games sold because of it.
Oh yeah, like Pandemic sold out worldwide for a while because of them. And like, so people were essentially, I guess, paying this producer or somehow compensating this producer to get access to basically, you know, Will Wheaton and his audience essentially with tabletop, and he didn't know anything about it until he went to like Gencon or something, and someone's like, you know, this kind of bugs me the way you handle it. And he was like, what?
And he's like, for him though, he's like, you know, he's so financially stable. And I think that's an interesting thing to think about perspective-wise though. Like, where are you with the hobby? Like, because there's a lot of people that are in even the board game media creation hobby that don't have that solid of a job, that don't have the ability to just sort of like play this for pleasure, that are looking for a way to try to make money, to make ends meet, you know, and they've got a lot of talents, and this might be a platform for them to share those talents. Specifically, when I think about what I'm lacking is video editing, any sort of creative medium, and definitely in any sort of like online database usage, like and management, like that stuff just, you know, that's why I spent 12 hours doing today. And it just like, it's like nightmares. It's nightmares worse than the Kalis box that we were talking about in the comments earlier. And I think another thing that was just mentioned is like, for putting out video reviews, it's like the only people that seem to really keep up with it is those that are incredibly passionate about it and are doing it because they're essentially post-conventional. And I don't know if you guys, like, if that's entirely a correct use of the word, but where somebody has already been so successful to where they don't need to do anything, essentially. Like if somebody has sold something or, you know, made a bunch of money in some sort of an endeavor, and they are to the point where they're like, I've won the lottery, I'm good for the rest of my life. And then they no longer need to worry about money. So they're like, that they can do this and not have a worry about it. And even people like the great Scott Nicholson, who was brought up, who was one of the first people to ever even make video reviews, when he got out of video reviews was asking for money to do them because the review copies by themselves aren't worth it.
Oh no, it's not. It's a huge amount of work in the backdrop for what you have to do. Here's another interesting bias to think about though with review copies, reviews, and such. Is the impetus on you to do positive reviews? Because let's think about this. Let's say you are in it for some stupid idea that you're going to get review copies. How many review copies do you think publishers are going to give you if you're doing mostly meh or negative reviews? Mm-hmm. Like, does the desire to get review copies then influence you to do more positive reviews because publishers are only likely to give you games for games that you're going to do a positive review of?
I'm going to give advice on this topic, and that is if you think you are being helpful when you write the publisher a detailed description of your specific issues with the game, and along with an invitation to forward that game to somebody who might like it more, that publisher is going to look at that and think, I'm never sending that individual another game unless you're too big to fail, unless you're so big that you can do whatever you want. And so if you get a review copy and you don't like that game, don't say anything. Like, as a matter of fact, if you want to pass on to somebody else, try to do that. Don't get on there. Don't let the publisher personally know, because it's, you know, at that point, it's like they're just going to blacklist you. They're going to say like, oh, well, they didn't like this game. They're not in our pocket. And I don't know, like, you got to think like from publishers, they're making money in this hobby, you know, and it, like, it's not just publishers that are making money. It's media creators that are making money. But what is it? I mean, if you've got a community that's supporting you, now, and I've never asked for any money from any of our supporters, like to run this. It's something that we do for fun. It's something that, you know, that like, if anything, if I had a catastrophic loss of equipment, then I would feel like I had a platform to ask for money. Because it's like, if you guys want to see this again, I ain't got the cash, you know, like just buy me this. But then at the same time, Trent, when I said that to you about like hosting, if somebody pays for your hosting, then you're biased towards them. So It is. It's not much different. It's just like money for this versus money for that. The thing is, like, I just keep on running into this, like, feeling like a maelstrom of like, when we talk about this, it's just, how do you fix it? How do you make it so that all these negative things that we've talked about, all these pitfalls, where is the sturdy ground?
There isn't any.
Yep. That's life. I think, though, here's the deal. And weirdly enough, I'm not going to get political about this, but a lot of people say this is the way to solve politics too. It's, who do you want your bias to go to? So, for example, if you're getting paid by publishers and hosting money and other things, or paid for reviews, then your bias is towards the publisher, not to the people who are going to be watching your reviews. If you are crowdfunded by Patreon, Kickstarter, or whatever, then your bias is towards those people, because that's where your money's coming from. It's like what they say in government all the time: follow the money. So you just need to be upfront about where you want your bias. If you're saying, I'm doing this for all of you people, all of my fans, but your money is coming from board game publishers, that's BS. Your bias is towards the publishers. You're doing it for them.
Yeah. But what about this, though, Andy? What if your bias is towards, I guess I'll just be fully disclosed here. So having a sponsor on this website means that we are given like compensation. In this case, it's in the form of board games, and it's not towards all of us. It's not. Like, Trent gets nothing. It's because he specifically he wants to keep himself unbiased in his reviews. And if that affects your like opinion of Trent's reviews, I hope that it increases your opinion of them. But here's the thing: if it comes from somebody who makes money, when the entire, like, when people are happy with their games, meaning, like, I play a game, I like a game, I tell people, hey, this is a really good game, I think you'll like it. Like, of course, there's that element of bias where it's just like, well, Joe Sallin said it was a good game, therefore maybe I'll like it. And I do not, in any fantasy, not even in my deepest, darkest fantasy, believe that actually happens. But, like, when your person that sponsors you, like in our example of Game Surplus right now, they get money when people are happy with their games and buying games. Right. And they get money when people buy their games from them, even though they're the exact same game that they could buy from another online merchant that sponsors a different podcast. And I mean, like, what type of bias is that, though, Andy? Because you said, and I want to hear this from Trent. What type of bias does that give you if the person that's sponsoring you is getting money just when games sell, not when their games sell, but games sell?
I mean, I guess that's okay. I don't really know. I have less of a problem being sponsored by a game store than I would by an individual publisher. Because a game store is going to make money no matter what game I talk about. So as long as I'm talking about games, they're good to go.
Yeah.
And that's my topic anyway. There's not any reason to change my topic. I want to back up a second and comment on a bit about me not receiving a review copy. I've intentionally told Game Surplus and Joe and others that I don't want to receive any. And the reason is because basically here's the deal. I feel like I know from past experiences that if I receive a review copy of something, I am biased towards it. Okay? And the thing is, I want to, when I talk about a board game, I want my board game hobby to be as free of the kind of entanglement as possible. If I want to take a giant dump on a game, I don't want to feel like there's an entanglement. What I do when I go on here is I talk about whatever game I have played most recently a couple times. And if that game sucks, I don't want to feel like I'm making someone upset by saying that it sucks because they've sent me a review copy. That's something that's me. It's not about what other people do. But I will say, if someone sent me a copy, I wouldn't feel okay going on here and saying, that game sucks.
Exactly, man. That's so true. And it's
Splendor sucks, okay? If they had sent me a review copy, I would be hesitant to say that. But I'm not been sent a review copy of Splendor, so Splendor sucks. My personal apology to the game designer. I'm not insulting you personally, but I don't like your game. Okay, I don't. I haven't. But if you had sent me a copy, I would feel bad about saying that, and I'd probably resist it and say Splendor's all right. Yeah. But I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. So for me, this is purely fun. I don't have any reason to ever become a name in the board game hobby or to like make a living out of this. That's not what I'm doing. I'm doing this because it's fun. It's an entertaining way to spend Thursday evening, which is when we record.
Absolutely, man. Yeah,
So,
and I hope that everybody out there is enjoying their commutes, and people that are here right now, man, this is a great way to spend some time. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's why I don't receive the copies. It's not about that for me. This is just like an extension for me to talk about games with my friends who are the other co-hosts of this show. So that's why I don't receive copies. I don't want that to be an influence. Now, other people may feel differently, and that's up to them. But I just wanted to back up and save my deal with the no review copy thing. There, go onwards.
Yeah.
I think my thoughts on it too are when it comes to sponsors, it really depends on why and how they're your sponsor. So, for example, let's just take ours, Game Surplus. I totally am cool with having Game Surplus as a sponsor. Why? Because I have a history of buying from Game Surplus. I have bought games from them that I legitimately wouldn't have got any other way, or they would have been, much higher prices. So having them
the
as
same
a sponsor,
games that I can get from Game Surplus right now are ones that I used to have to wait 1 to 2 months and order them from like Amazon Deutschland, and they would come in a box that had no packaging and was beat to crap. So yeah, I'm sorry, Andy, go on.
Right. So for them, for example, I have no problem with having them as a sponsor. Because they're not, like I said, even if they send you a game, it's not really a vested interest in like they don't care what you really say about it as long as you tell people to buy games from them. What would be weird for me though would be let's use Geek Chic as an example because they're out of business.
Okay.
let's say Geek Chic says I will sponsor your show. And then, okay, I have to come on my show and say how great Geek Chic tables are when I don't have one even frickin' sitting in my house.
Well, usually I think they give you one, and then that's kind of like their sponsorship, is that they're giving you one.
Well, but it doesn't work that way. I mean, I know other situations where they're not. And for me, I don't think for me, now, if that's the case, whatever, do what you want. But for me personally, like if a company were to say, hey, I'll totally sponsor you, say how great my products are, and I've never used that product, I would feel problematic at that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good, that's an interesting thing to point out. I think, here's another, I don't want to elongate this too much more. I mean, it's been a really interesting discussion so far, but here's a question for you. Let's say that you have played a game and you have noticed specific faults with that game, and now a second edition of that game is coming out. You already own the first edition, and the second edition maybe makes cosmetic or component changes, but no specific gameplay changes. If you ask for a review copy of that game, what type of bias does that entail now? And I'll just straight up say it. I'll straight up say this. I love the game Modern Art. I loved it, Trent, when you played it, when you brought it and taught it ages ago. What was that, like 2-3 years ago? And I thought, man, this is a great game. And I looked online, tried to find it, and I ended up getting Modern Art, the card game, which is not Modern Art. It's not Modern Art.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
It's terrible. It's awful. I read the rules, and I was like, I wanted to rip it in half. Anyway, sorry, guys. Okay, I needed at least one outburst. The thing is, since then, Cool Mini or Not has come out with a new version of Modern Art. Modern Art is still the same game, but now the art has been changed. The components have been made larger, and just in general, I think it is made larger and just like I would say improvements. Unless you really prefer the specific art that was in that the last edition, there's some really, really nice stuff in this box. The game itself has not changed. What is your bias if you get a review copy of that? And is it different to ask for a review copy of a game you already know you like versus a game that you don't know anything about, don't care about?
I mean, I have no. I mean, here's the thing. I feel like when I would ask for a review copy, it would sway my opinion towards the positive more than it already is. But I guess it's weird if you already know your review is going to be positive to ask for. I mean, the worst thing that could happen is you could say the components are bad. But
they really crapped the bed here on this one.
But I mean, if it's the same game you know you already love, I mean, you're predisposed to give it a positive review. So why not?
You're already biased, so at that point you're biased. It's like, because I mean, even like for me, a lot of the review copies I've specifically asked for have been games I already have played because I don't want to find myself in that situation. It's like, oh man, I really don't like this game. You know, like it's a really awkward spot to be in when you've requested or have received a review copy, and it's like, what do I do here? Like, you know, if I turn around and say, like, this is what I was interested in and I didn't find these things, like, I don't want to be blacklisted by a publisher. And at the same time, like I know from listening to others' experiences that you don't say anything to publisher specifically because you're pointing it out to them that you were a poor business venture for them. Because they're looking at it from the money perspective. They're not going to care, you know. They're not like, oh, well, hey, they're a prolific reviewer. And what about this? This comes back to the D&D experience that I just had. Like, Jonathan was right there selling that experience to me the whole time. He's a friend of mine. He's somebody I enjoy his company. He has some very uncanny capabilities of imitation that I mentioned and just sound production that really enriched the experience. And that's on an objective level. I think no matter who you are, but like he came to that game with this spirit of like, I'm going to make this experience fun for everybody, myself included. And it was like that sort of spirit was just infectious. But at that point, am I biased because of my predisposition, of my enjoyment of the specific, the game master or somebody I like? What happens if I get taught a game by somebody I hate? And I don't know why that would happen. But anyway, what happens if you have a terrible experience with somebody? Let's say that they ruined a 6-hour game of something. Like, I've probably done that to you guys before. I am probably the person, the culprit for that. If I ruined a game that was really long for you, and then 2 days later, I taught you a game, would you be predisposed to hate it?
No. Honestly, I wouldn't. I don't know.
Nah, Joe's curmudgeonly.
You guys, and I would just like to point out that these guys are so biased, they can't even admit that bias, and that's because I'm sitting here with them.
I assume that if I teach Joe a new game and I'm playing with him, he'll probably tell me how terrible it is before the end of the first time.
And then play it at Origins like 2 years later and love it.
Yep.
I'm sure that's happened. I'm sure that's happened because you said it, and I'm sure that sounds to me like something that can only be said by somebody with personal experience. So, yeah, I mean, we've touched on a lot of really deep topics here. This has been a really interesting discussion, and I think that hopefully we've been able to add something that hasn't just already been coming around in a lot of the sort of like cesspool discussion. So I hope that gives our listeners as well as our community, and I guess that's all part of the same thing. So I hope it gives our community a better idea of what specific positions we come from, and just in general, like, hopefully that gives you some perspective, and that way you'll come down hard on people to whom that actually deserve it. And just never forget this statement. And I am not a religious person, but I'm going to say that this is something that my dad always said was from the Bible or some sort of biblical teaching. And that is that you hate the sin, don't hate the sinner. So, it's the person is not a poisoned well. Their opinions are not totally dead. The practice needs to be condemned. The practice needs to be mentioned. And if the practice is wrong, the practice will be adjusted. The practice will be worked on. And the thing is, like, just in the end, it's everybody, even in any medium, no matter how big the world gets, everything is starting with a human being somewhere at its core. Like, these intellectual endeavors are not being taken on by inanimate objects. There's a person behind it, and don't forget that. And that's something I've learned a lot on this podcast. That is not something I came into this with.
You know what
Right.
I've learned from recording this podcast?
Wait,
God.
wait on me. What a transition here, Trent. What?
But it's time for a hype section.
Ah, that's a good job, man. All right, so let's go ahead and let's talk about Trent. I'm gonna save yours. Actually, we'll do yours right off the bat because you're gonna hype like a bajillion games.
Well, I don't know about a bajillion. I'm gonna hype a few. I'm going to Gen Con in a few days, and so
Woo!
I thought I'd talk about
Jealous.
a couple of the things that I'm gonna play at Gen Con. One thing I want to mention is I'm newest Fantasy Flight LCG, which is a remake of The Legend of the Five Rings, is being released at Gen Con. I'm playing in a debut tournament with 699 other people. Yeah, it's a 700-person tournament. And the interesting part about this is like it starts literally when the box is publicly released. You go to this tournament and they hand you the box and it's just been publicly released and they're like, open it up, figure out how to play it. We're having a tournament. And there's apparently going to be a bunch of pageantry, people's in costumes. I don't even really know what all is going on. They've written about it on their website. It sounds like it's going to be almost bordering on a spectacle. So I'm kind of amused by that. So games I'm actually looking forward to playing besides that, though, it looks like I'm going to get an opportunity to play Feudum, which I've been looking forward to quite a bit. Feudum it sounds like a bunch of mechanics in a box, and I want to see how it works. I really like the art style, though. I will give it that.
Yeah, it looks really cool. It's very unique.
It's supposed to be like a really good economic game, and that art style does not make you think economic.
Yeah, I know. I've heard a number of things about the mechanisms. I'm curious to try it.
I liked the fact that the Kickstarter sold itself on the mechanisms, though that was, like the art was definitely there. It was just never like, come play this game with awesome art. It was like, this is a nuanced game of economics.
Yep. There's a new mini expansion for Millennium Blades coming out. I'm going to just go to the level 99 booth and just buy that immediately because it's Millennium Blades, which I have a soft spot for.
Bias.
I'm biased. I love Millennium Blades. Games I'm definitely going to demo. I want to demo Whistle Stop by Bezier. It's a train game. Choose. I must demo it, right?
Whistle Stop is the name of the cafe in Boone. Here in Boone.
Yes. Anyway, it looks interesting, and I've heard from several people that have done early reviews of it. Oh, and they're probably biased reviews, I'm sure, and all that. The game is heavier than you initially expect from looking at it, and I'm really intrigued to give this one a try. It looks like it'll be about Age of Steam heaviness or a little bit less. Is kind of the gist I'm getting from it, and the board looks interesting. It looks like a pick up and deliver, where you're kind of building the board as you go along. So I'm intrigued by that. I want to see how that works. I'm going to actually demo the game Joe, I believe, is going to review because I believe he got to play the Kickstarter copy of it recently.
Spirit Island?
Spirit Island, yeah.
It was not Kickstarter. I just bought it off of Amazon, and I did that because, like when I started seeing what was going on with it, holy crap.
Okay, we'll get to that later, but that's what I'm going to demo at Gen Con. Another one is called Mini Rails, which supposedly compresses a lot of what's on an 18XX in about an hour. I'm very interested in that. That was one I'm going to hit. It's at a booth that's being shared with Tasty Minstrel. I don't really know how, but it's not being published by them, so I'm not really sure how that works. Those are the big ones I'm thinking of trying there. I hope to get a chance to play City of Big Shoulders. I don't know if that's going to work out or not.
I hope you do too. I'd be really interested to hear what you say.
I was trying really hard to get a shot at playing Imperial, which is the upcoming game from Level 99, which is basically like Age of Steam meets Argent. But the designer is actually not going to make it, unfortunately. But he has promised me a game of it at BGG-Con.
Is that the D. Brad Talton?
No, the designer is Trey Chambers. It's the guy that designed Argent.
Oh, no, yeah, that's right. Okay, and which one is this now? This is the...
It's Imperial, like Steam and Spells and Steam. It's like apparently a mix of Age of Steam and Argent. So,
dude, that actually sounds really interesting. And we're going to be doing an Argent episode on the Longview eventually, and I think I'm going to be forced to revisit the fact that I don't think I gave that game enough of a chance that it deserved. Sorry to derail you.
Okay. But anyway, that's the big stuff I'm going to hit. I'm also playing in a number of different events and tournaments, many of them RPG related and so on. I'm going to the They Might Be Giants concert at Gen Con. It's literally
You're
like,
participating in the age-old RPG tournament, the one where everybody is all fighting together and they're all like trying to win their party and
you're being
become
sarcastic, but they have those.
like that sounds like a bunch of Munchkin.
That's kind of what it is. But they have those. They have like tournaments where like RPG tournaments.
Yeah, well, I mean, I understand with the historical sword fighting tournaments. That makes sense.
Yeah, one of my friends has like actually won it a bunch of years back in the 90s. Like he was like a consistent winner of them. And I'm like, how do you consistently win at Munchkin? I don't really understand it. Whatever. That's his deal, not mine. One other thing I do want to mention in terms of role playing, Paizo's releasing Starfinder there, which is like they take the Pathfinder engine, which is basically D&D, but it's D&D in space. Yeah, it's like sci-fi themed Pathfinder. I am very, very interested in that. I'm trying really hard to get into a session of it, but all of the Starfinder stuff sold out at Gencon so fast you can blink. Like any session of anything Starfinder was like instantly gone. So I don't know that I'm going to get to play it there, but I'm very interested. I am more, honestly, in the end, more of a sci-fi person than a fantasy person.
Yeah,
it's
me
just
too.
There's not as much. There's a lot more fantasy prevalent in the gaming hobby and in pop culture right now than there is sci-fi. So it is what it is. Anyway, that's the big things I'm going to hit there. I will say big pitch next Friday, which will be August 18th. That'd be the day you'd want to follow me on Twitter, as I have literally no events that day, and I'm basically going to be trolling the dealer hall, taking pictures and posting.
When Trent trolls.
Yes, I'm gonna get pictures of all kinds of stuff. And I also want to mention the climbers from Capstone Games. They will have copies there. I probably will wind up buying one.
Yeah, that seems like a really probably good fit for you because your kids are going to be able to play it, but they'll quickly realize that you own them. I wonder if they actually will like that.
That's my kids learn that with abstracts all the time. And then what they do is we'll get a new abstract, I'll figure it out, I'll pound them really bad at first. Then they'll play each other for a long time, and then they'll actually get better than me or get as good as me, and I haven't played it, and then the games get interesting.
Either that or they'll start ganging up on Trent and figure out how to use their blocking stones.
That will happen. Yeah, this is a group game. Team up on dad often happens.
Yeah. For some reason, board gaming with family equals dad is primary target. I've learned this.
Anyway, next Friday especially, I will be covering Gencon on Twitter. My Twitter username is Gaming Trent. If you feel the good, bored, and ugly on Twitter, you'll see me mentioned fairly often. But on that account, I'll be posting a lot of Gencon stuff on that Friday.
Yeah, it's like at Gaming Trent. Yeah. Definitely follow Trent for that day.
Assuming I have good internet connection at all, I will be posting all kinds of updates.
Yeah, come see how Trent turns the dealer hall somehow into a game of diplomacy.
It involves bias.
That's for sure. I'm going to go up to everybody I see in the dealer hall that I know is a video reviewer and just accuse them of having bias.
Accuse them of having undisclosed
I know Edward from Heavy Cardboard is going to be at the Capstone booth. I'm going to go up there and go like, you're biased. Just stare at him in the eye. I'm actually one of the 3 people that's ever around him that's taller than him, so I'll stare down at him gently. You're biased. And then it'll be really awkward and be like, what is wrong with you?
Or Trent will start gathering people together and convince them to assault a certain booth, when in reality he just wants to push them over there so he can get copies of a game at a different booth.
Yeah, that's the plan. But yeah. The only game I can say I'm probably definitely going to come home with is the Climbers and the Millennium Blade expansion pack, and the copy of L5R that I'm getting for participating in the tournament.
Yeah. Well, that sounds awesome, man. That's really exciting. A lot of those games. I hope that you do get a chance to play many of the ones that you mentioned. I mean, Spirit Island so far, I did get one play in of it, and I'm glad that you mentioned that. Was that all the games that you had?
That's the ones I have written down, but I have them. I'm gonna go try to go.
We're gonna have a whole like our next episode after like next week's episode. If you only listen for Trent, you might skip next week's episode because he's gonna be at Gen Con. And then the week after that, though, will most likely be, if everything goes according to plan, like a sort of Gen Con, unpacking Gen Con with Trent. And that'll be a time when we really do go in depth about the games that he's mentioned, as well as anything else that caught his eye.
Yep, I'll be
He
taking
trolls
notes.
that dealer hall.
Yep, Friday will be the big day where I'm doing a lot of that because the other days I have events, but Friday I'm completely open to wander the dealer hall and take pictures and take notes. So there you go.
Mm-hmm. Awesome stuff, man. Well, I'm going to talk about Spirit Island right now because you've already mentioned that one a little bit. I did get to play it once, and this is one of those kind of like Andy occasionally do like a quick look review. Well, mine is, if I could describe Spirit Island in a sentence, it is like Mage Knight, except everybody around the table kind of has their own sort of Mage Knight where they're solving it and they're totally in control of what cards they have. And imagine Mage Knight if every turn you had your sort of puzzle solved of what you were going to do, and then that person to your left said, hey, dude, I really need you to do this right now. Like, I need you to do that right now because otherwise my effect doesn't even happen. And you're sitting there and you're like, I just spent the last 3 minutes solving my turn, and now I have to resolve everything and play a card that allows you to do that. And it's like, what I mean is there is so much personal agency in this game. There's so much stuff that a player personally gets to choose in terms of their board presence and other things that it is just, it's so much to keep in your head and so much to solve. And then when you add the cooperative aspect to it, it just makes the game get so rabbit hole deep. And there's a lot of unpredictability in this game, but most of it, you have at least some aspect of control over it. And all I can say is, when you play this, unless you're playing it with heavy gamers that want to get essentially, like Andy, are a masochist that love pain, play it on the easy recommended settings in the rule book. Just do that for me. I'm really excited to play it again, and I am going to be giving it a full review as soon as I can get it played and as soon as I can get my copy, because I'm hoping it did not get back ordered like a lot of the ones did that are on Amazon right now. Anyway, I'm really excited and hyped up to play Spirit Island. Andrew, tell us about the game you're excited about.
Yeah.
Which happens to be Pacific. Am I saying this right? Pacific Typhoon or Pacific Tycoon?
Pacific Typhoon.
Typhoon is like a storm, right?
Yes.
Okay, just checking.
Yep.
Go on, sir.
So I'm going to hype Pacific Typhoon, which is a quirky game. So I heard about this one actually on I think it was Heavy Cardboard's WBC when they went to the World Board Gaming Tournament or whatever it was. Breakdown, because they were in a tournament of it, and it sounded really odd, like that should not work together, which then made me interested in it. So I managed to grab a copy of it for a decent price. But it's a trick-taking war game filler.
No, it's not. Calling BS on that. It's not.
Yeah, it's weird.
That's not a thing, Andy. Not.
Yes, it's a thing. I've got it. But yeah, anyway, so that's basically it. I do have the copy. It came in the mail a couple days ago. I haven't had a chance to read the rules yet. But I've managed to glimpse a couple things of it that's just weird because there's like aircraft carriers, or yeah. So basically there's like boats, submarines, and like planes, and those are the suits. And you basically create a battle, and you play cards as either the Japanese or American forces, and resolve a battle that way. And then there's spoils given and stuff. I don't know. I got to read the rules yet, but this is weird. And
yeah,
so
Andy, that's about all I can echo back is no. Just thing happens. That thing happens when you sleep, Andy. That's a nightmare.
There's dice in it.
No, come on. Trent taking a game with dice? What do you think about that, Trent?
I don't necessarily object to dice. So
well, yeah.
It's okay to me.
Anyway.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's weird, but yeah, so I'm hyping this, and good luck finding a copy because it was out of print as of Heavy Cardboard giving it the bump there, and I think they they literally bought the last copy that Game Surplus had of it. And I think I bought the last copy in America that the BGG marketplace had of it. And I got it for MSRP too, which like floored me. As soon as I saw it pop up, I was like, buy, done. And just out of curiosity, I checked a little bit ago. There's only 1 out of like 5 yesterday copies left in the world on the BGG marketplace. So if you want to dump €50 plus whatever the heck it takes to ship it from Europe, yeah, you can go get a copy. But I'm interested to try it. I don't know. It looked interesting. It looked quirky, and it looked different, which are all things that intrigue me in a game. So
definitely.
Whatever. I got it. We'll see if it's any good or not. It was totally an impulse buy. I will admit it. So,
well, you never know, man. I don't know how to evaluate the type of buy it was and the type of game it'll be. It'd be interesting though, and as long as it plays short, and I wonder what the silent coefficient would be on it. But as long as you tell me that you think I'd like it, I'll probably like it because I'm that easily swayed.
Yeah, you'll really like it as I pass Joe a $5 bill.
And that's this week's episode of The Good, the Bored, and the Ugly. Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Joe Sallin. I've been joined tonight by
Andrew Dennison.
Trent Ham.
Have a great week of gaming. And catch us next week on The Good, the Bored, and the Ugly.